Hello, everybody. My name is Caleb Zimmer, and I'll be your host today for our podcast. Today's episode in Once Upon a Crime is Little Red Riding Hood. Continue listening to find out about the horrible crimes of the fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood has committed. Now, on to a summary of the book. There are lots of versions, so this is the story I'll be using, and we will apply the criminal offenses to this. Little Red Riding Hood was given a bottle of wine and a piece of cake to give her grandma by her mother. She then ventures into the woods alone, away from the village, and met a wolf. And the wolf asks questions such as what she's carrying and where does her grandmother live. It is then described that in the wolf's mind, he devises a plan to eat Little Red Riding Hood to distract the girl then. He tells her to go pick flowers for her grandmother and runs to her grandmother's house. He then impersonated Little Red Riding Hood to enter the grandmother's house, and that is when he went and devoured her. He then put on her clothes and impersonated the grandma to Little Red Riding Hood. And then, when Little Red Riding Hood walked in, she questions her grandma, and then the wolf devours her. He then went to bed and snored very loudly. A huntsman passing by heard the noise and went to investigate. Finding the wolf asleep, he prepared to kill it with his hunting rifle, but then he thought to himself, what if the grandmother that was devoured could still be saved? The huntsman proceeded to grab a pair of scissors and cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. Inside the wolf, he found Little Red Riding Hood and the grandmother still alive. Little Red Riding Hood proceeded to fill the wolf's belly with stones after she escaped and her grandmother. It is not described how the wolf's belly came back together, but anyways, the wolf awoke, he tried to run away, but then collapsed through the weight of the stones and died. Then the three were delighted after the event, and they moved on, and Little Red Riding Hood learned not to trust strangers, such as the wolf. In this story, all the parties that were involved were the wolf as the main suspect, Grandma and Little Red Riding Hood as the victims, and the huntsman as the witness. Now, on to criminal crimes committed throughout the story. The criminal offenses goes as follows. Under Section 403, it states that identity fraud. This deals with the impersonation and the intent to gain advantage or to cause disadvantage, such as the wolf impersonating the grandmother to devour Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf swallows the grandmother alive, which follows Actus Reus, and he does this to prevent her from getting in the way of his plan to swallow Little Red Riding Hood, which follows Mens Rea. Under Section 239 states attempted murder. This section addresses attempts to kill, where the intent to kill is evident if unsuccessful, such as the wolf failing to kill Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma. On to our next one. Section 215, Child Endangerment. This section outlines the duty of the current caretaker of the child under 16 years, which is parent or guardian, as an example, to provide the necessaries of life. So Little Red Riding Hood venturing out into the forest can be seen as neglect from her mother, which follows Actus Reus, and willful blindness to Little Red Riding Hood's safety, thus making it follow Mens Rea. Now, on to the next one. Section 445.1, Animal Cruelty. This deals with the action of causing unnecessary suffering to an animal, such as the wolf being filled with stones, and then trying to run away and dies by Little Red Riding Hood. And he could have been easily put down by a hunting rifle that the huntsman had. So, yeah. This follows Actus Reus because the stones being put into the wolf's belly, and Mens Rea due to willful blindness about the gun they had to put the wolf down, the intent to harm the wolf as a punishment for swallowing them. Now, on to our next subject, the worst crime committed. Overall, throughout the story, the worst crime committed is obviously attempted murder by the wolf because it's the attempt to end someone's life. And in this case, it was two of the lives he tried to end. So, in this story, the principal offender was the wolf. So yeah, the category of the charge would be indictable offense, as these charges were in the highest category of criminal charges and they carry severe penalties such as life in prison. On to the possible penalties for Little Red Riding Hood. For the wolf, he will probably face life in prison for attempted murder and the impersonation of the grandma. He also may face 10 years from the impersonation alone because of an indictable offense, as he impersonated with the intent to kill somebody. For Grandma, she could face animal cruelty because of the willful blindness to the action Little Red Riding Hood did to the wolf, but she was in shock, and she also was kind of traumatized from the experience, and this could be cleared up as self-defense from the grandma. Now, for the huntsman, he could also face animal cruelty, but because the grandma, too, this could be considered as self-defense. Now, Little Red Riding Hood would face animal cruelty, but in the story, it seems Little Red Riding Hood is under the age of 12, which means she cannot be held criminally responsible for her actions, which means she wouldn't get charged, and the authorities would likely put Little Red Riding Hood into therapy or counseling to help with any psychological issues that come from this situation, as well as the charges that would be placed onto the parents, such as the mother. The mother of Little Red Riding Hood would be facing child endangerment from neglect of her child's safety when Little Red Riding Hood ventured into the forest alone. I believe an appropriate sentence for the wolf would be life in prison due to everything that he did, such as attempted murder and impersonation. An appropriate sentence for Little Red Riding Hood's mother would be probation for 1, maybe 2 years, with mandatory parenting classes, supervision by Child Protection Service until the end of the probationary period, and just a warning if she does comply with all the conditions. No jail time needed, as it was only just a one-time issue. Now, for the grandma, I don't think she would get charged because it could be seen as self-defense. Same with the huntsman. And as I stated before, Little Red Riding Hood cannot be charged. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to an end of Once Upon a Crime. Thank you for listening. Be careful of strangers, and have a jolly, good, full day.